Right.
Hey folks, it's 7 o'clock. I'm going to start this meeting, so I'm going to call it to order. In front of us is the agenda for the committee of the whole meeting, October 8th at 7 p.m. here at the village office. I also mentioned, but I will do it while we're in the meeting, that for people in attendance here in the chambers and online, their meetings are recorded for public viewing and placed on a publicly available website. I'm going to also ask us if we'd like to speak to raise our hands. I will keep a speakers list. And just as a matter of course, so we don't get into bad habits, let's address each other as Councillor Lewis, Mayor, CAO, Pete Nelson Smith. It's just, we don't want to get into those bad habits. So even though it's a more casual meeting as a committee of the whole, we need to remember to address each other accordingly. And I'm the first one to be bad at that, so please remind me if I foul up. Acknowledge that we are on the unceded First Nations land of the Hadisat-Chiniki territory here today, and I'll get an approval of the agenda, and then I will ask everyone to introduce themselves. So if I get somebody to,
Motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. Thank you, Councillor Janice. Any additions? Questions, deletions, anything like that? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That is carried. So here in chambers, council chambers, I'll start. I'm Mayor Julie Colburn, Village of Zeballos. I'll pass it over to.
Hi, Justin Janice, Village of Zeballos.
CAO Pete Nelson Smith, Village of Zeballos.
And then online, if you would introduce yourselves, please, and thank you.
Shall I start then?
Please.
Hello, folks. Good evening. Lauren Fletcher. I'm coming to you from the southern part of the island, the city of Langford, where the city of Langford acknowledges and honors the traditional territories of the Coast Salish, specifically the Esquimalt, Songhees, Beecher Bay peoples, all represented by the Sarplik, Petchquiam, Saut and Sycam, and the Malahat nations. And we, of course, thank them for sharing this beautiful land. I am the manager of community safety and municipal enforcement for the city of Langford. I've been here with Langford for 30 years now in this role. So I'd like to think I'm starting to figure out what I'm supposed to be doing here.
And Barb Lewis, councillor for the Village of Zeballos.
And Councilman Ron Deck from Reno Street in Zeballos.
Nice to meet you, folks.
Likewise.
I think Alana's just observing.
Alana's just observing. So Alana Janice, who is our deputy CAO, deputy finance clerk, is on as observation this evening. So thank you so much for coming and welcome. We have one small item of business, and that's just the minutes. And then I think that the bulk of this meeting is all devoted to you, Mr. Fletcher. So thank you for being here this evening.
Move to approve minutes on September 10th, 2024, committee of the whole.
Second.
Thank you for that. Errors, omissions, deletions, anything anybody want to follow up on? Seeing none, I am going to call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That is carried. So we have in front of us a staff report. I'll get CAO Nelson Smith to speak to it if you'd like to, and then pass it right on to Mr. Fletcher.
Thank you. Maybe I'll just do a quick recap for Mr. Fletcher's benefit.
Thank you.
So many months ago in May, council started discussing the possibility of introducing a couple of bylaws, the main one being a noise bylaw. But within that discussion, it came to light that we don't have any means of penalizing people that don't want to voluntarily comply with the bylaws. out of that discussion came the idea of either entertaining a municipal ticketing information bylaw or the bylaw adjudication system as a means of doing penalization for those that don't want to adhere to the bylaws. Given that none of us are experts in these fields, council directed staff to find an expert on the subject matter and present to council what would be the best method of ticketing for a community our size and for the bylaws that we're looking at. And so I was fortunate enough to find Mr. Fletcher, who has agreed to come speak to council tonight.
Perfect, thank you for that. And also just to add, you know, our demographic here, there's, you know who we are and where we are. And that we also get the Strathcona Regional District to administer our bylaws for us. And we've got the typicals as you would expect anywhere: unsightly animal bylaw. We're looking at doing a parking bylaw. We're looking at moving forward. And so any information you can give us is greatly appreciated. So I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to give you a bit of background, I mentioned I've been here at Langford for 30 years. Just for you folks, the benefit of understanding, I've also been teaching at the Justice Institute, the bylaw investigative skills courses, for close to 10 years now, and that's both the level 1 and the level 2. I was president of the Licensed Inspectors and Bylaw Officers Association many years ago when this legislation, the provincial legislation, was brought in. The whole reason that the legislation came forward was because at the time, municipal tickets were the sole method of ticketing in the province of BC. And the courts were finding they were overwhelmed with disputes on municipal tickets. So the chief judge of the day directed Nils Jensen, Crown prosecutor, with the prosecution service, to search out an administrative process which would fall largely into the hands of the local governments. So you folks in Zeballos would have a lot of authority, a lot of ability to be able to manage your own affairs. It wouldn't be a system that would fall within the confines of the provincial court. And as you might appreciate, when you have a court process, you're beholden to strict hearing dates and times. Where you folks are located, I believe you're at least 3 hours from the closest provincial courthouse. Municipal ticketing would not work for you in this instance. So your CAO has given you good advice, good direction with respect to choosing the bylaw offense notice as a means of ticketing, because the whole process is designed to be incentivized. And what I mean by that, I think with your package, you've got an example of, say, Gold River's bylaw. And in that bylaw, you'll see a series of schedules that identify specific regulatory bylaws, like your animal control, like your noise, like your parking bylaws. And within that schedule, there are 3 columns, and those columns are broken down to the actual penalty for a violation, an early payment, a reduced amount, and then a late penalty charge. So as you can appreciate, that system is set up to really encourage people to deal with their penalties, with their fines early on, because they get a discount if they deal with it on an early basis, and they're also penalized further if they delay in their dealing with the outstanding tickets. We've been running both the municipal ticketing system here at Langford and the bylaw offense notice system. I can say from personal experience, the municipal ticketing system is difficult in so many ways, not just because it's a court-based system, but because it takes a lot of rules of evidence, documentation. So you have to be able to prove a municipal ticket violation beyond a reasonable doubt. It's to a criminal standard, whereas the bylaw offense notice really lays out the standard or the test as being balance of probability. So 50% plus 1. that's the tipping point where you can achieve basically confirmation that you have a violation of the bylaw. So for your bylaw enforcement officer, be that someone who's working for the regional district or in-house or even the RCMP, your requirements for evidence are relaxed. The other advantage to the bylaw offense notice system is the screening component. With this, you bring in or you identify a screening officer, somebody who is not connected directly with the issuance of the original penalty, but they will go through, they can follow up directly with the violator. They can look at the evidence that's involved, compare the situation with what your bylaw requires, and if all aspects of that offense or violation add up to that balance of probabilities, then you basically move forward with the penalty. If anything along that whole process of a review by the screening officer gives you an opportunity to say, all the evidence isn't here, the facts don't add up, the violation probably did not occur, the screening officer has the ability to basically cancel the ticket. The other aspect, the other good aspect to this is you can actually enter into what's called a compliance agreement, and that compliance agreement will allow the village, in this case, to actually negotiate with the individual a period of time where they might make every effort to comply, and then your violation or your penalty, basically your penalty is removed. And so you've achieved compliance. They've brought their property or the issue at hand into compliance as well, and they're not paying a penalty at that point. So there's a tremendous amount of flexibility there. The downside to municipal tickets is you wait sometimes 6 months for a court hearing, and by the time that 6 months goes by, everyone's forgotten about the facts of the case. And the penalty really at that point becomes almost negligible because of so much time having passed. I think the report that your CAO has prepared really does lay out the key aspects of this, and I see there's a suggested policy, a screening officer policy, and you've got, as I said, an example of the Gold River version of that bylaw. Those are all really standard components of this mechanism. The Local Government Management Association has a toolkit online that is really good guidance. And I'll talk a bit about your adjudicator. Your adjudicator is almost like a judge in a court hearing. That's an independent third party, comes from a roster of people appointed by the provincial government to hear these cases, and they make a decision based on the facts that they have presented to them by both the municipal government as well as the disputant in the case of the ticket that's being issued. They render their judgment on the status, whether or not the person, whether or not the violation occurred or did not occur, and so you're not dealing in-house with making a decision. Although your screening officer does have a lot of authority, a lot of leeway with respect to the outcome of whether or not this ticket goes to an adjudicator or not. I hope I've answered any questions that might be lingering, but certainly ask away, and I'll see if I can help you out with some of those questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. And do I have I don't have a speakers list so far. What questions does council have for this very knowledgeable guest in our presence today? CAO Nelson Smith.
Thank you. In a community our size, we really have 2 full-time administrative employees. So as far as the screening officer goes, do you have examples in small communities of who that may be?
Yeah, and through you, Madam Mayor, the screening officer can be anyone who has an awareness around natural justice, rules of evidence, some very basic legal principles. It doesn't have to be at all complicated. Natural justice basically is being able to make a decision absent of a bias. So a complete and fair review of the tickets is important. Generally speaking, we all have very sound principles, and something like a ticketing process. We're going to take that seriously, and we will apply that natural justice and those principles that we all have. So to answer the question, though, the CAO, if you've got an administrative assistant, really you can assign this screening officer task to pretty much anyone. Your policy is going to be their guiding principle, basically to screen these tickets. And the only real prominent rule here is the person who issues the ticket cannot be the screening officer. They cannot screen their own tickets. An obvious statement, I would think.
And that's a kind of, my biggest issue with the entire process is there's two people here that are trying to keep the lights on with all of the legislative changes and the downloading that the province has been doing, and now we're going to open ourselves up for another time taker away from the people in this office. And so I'm wondering, have you come across any there's no like-sized villages, any smaller villages who have maybe contracted that out to someone in another municipality or at a different bylaw? It raises questions for me if the bylaw officer from Mount Waddington or the Comox Valley would have the time to do this via a municipal services agreement or something like that, as we're using the SRD for the bylaw officer and we can't use them for the screening officer. Have you heard of anything like that?
There's all sorts of arrangements in the province of BC right now with respect to setting up cooperative adjudication sessions. I'll just use a large example. Metro Vancouver or Kelowna, Penticton, Vernon as another example. Those folks will actually schedule adjudication hearings amongst themselves. They'll set a date and they'll move the hearings to the different communities. And in some cases, to go straight to your question, there's no reason that I can imagine where the screening aspect could not be forwarded off to another either municipality or regional district who has people on staff who are conversant with the process. Screening is not complex. It really isn't complex. I get parking tickets. Just to give you an example, I'm identified as the screening officer. My senior bylaw enforcement officer is identified. Our deputy CAO. There's three of us basically, so that if one of us is away, we always have somebody available. So there's no reason, excuse me, why through a similar arrangement as communities have already undertaken with respect to sharing an adjudicator for these hearings, why you couldn't share the screening process.
That's really interesting to me because I know that people come in this office to make their bylaw complaint. Although we don't write the bylaw, that goes to the bylaw officer. There's still that appearance of that we are the people who are, there are bylaws, we're enforcing them, right? And so I just want to, I'm curious about whether, the CAO in Gold River wants us to screen for them and they can screen for us or something, or, something to that effect.
If I may,
I do worry about the time limit that it takes on our staff as well.
No, fair enough. The reality of this evaluation process that you folks want to contemplate is really how many tickets do you anticipate will be written in the course of a year?
Councillor Deck, I see your hand up. Would you like to ask a question?
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Mayor, and to Mr. Fletcher. I'm going to ask you the same question you just asked me. How many disputes do you think Zeballos will have in a year?
Well, you're looking, I would think, through you, Madam Mayor, I would think that the bylaws you're looking to support through a ticketing process will be likely animal control. Parking, I heard parking mentioned, but I don't imagine you're going to have too many. Parking may be your larger component, and parking tickets are really easy to screen. So even if you're receiving a dispute on 3 tickets in a month, 4 tickets in a month, that is going to take maybe 30 minutes to actually screen each of those tickets. Just if I can, I pulled some figures here. And here in Langford, and no direct comparison, but just to give you an idea, my officers have basically issued 2011 violation notices this year to date. Now, we use the ticketing system to provide vehicles with parking warnings. We have a parking enforcement policy that indicates first violation, you receive a warning. As the motorist who has parked that car in contravention, you receive a warning notice. It's a courtesy, it's an educational piece. So the enforcement policy really goes a long way to reducing the workload, especially when it comes to ticketing. Vehicles that have been issued a warning, we track, and if we find that vehicle in violation a second time, then a ticket is issued. So out of those 2011 violation notices, only 375 of those reoccurred as actual fines or penalties. And out of those, we received 225 payments. So as you can appreciate, that incentivized structure of the ticketing system, where you've got the penalty plus the opportunity of a reduction if paid early, that gets a lot of people to gets them motivated to actually come into City Hall and pay those tickets. Plus, they have the specter of an additional penalty if they're late dealing with that. So the system really does take care of a lot of natural flow in having motivating people to actually pay their tickets. So let's assume that Zeballos, you issue those parking tickets. You get some incentivized payments right up front. You might be screening about a third or even less of those tickets on a dispute. And I'm sorry, I can't project how many tickets you might issue in the course of a year.
Well, no, excuse me. We have 103 people in Zeballos. In Langford, you have how
50,000.
many?
50,000.
So chances are we maybe get 100 tickets in a year,
Maybe.
maybe.
Well, the other,
So it's not going to be a really big job for an official to take care of.
no, that's an excellent comment and very accurate. Yeah.
Yeah.
And part of the
And actually,
ticketing
you're
process, part of the
Sorry.
ticketing process is designed, as is any bylaw enforcement measure, it's designed to educate people and change their ways, change their habits. So as you're out there and dealing with these folks who are maybe violating your regulatory bylaws, they're learning, and you have fewer and fewer opportunities or a need for them to actually be violating because they're becoming better educated and they're not breaking the rules a second time.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Deck?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just wondering if the CAO wanted to comment without releasing any private information about how many bylaw infractions have moved through the office this year. And then what the anticipation may be from putting in a noise bylaw, because we'll be putting in additional bylaws. So the noise bylaw will be new. And then the parking bylaw will be new as well. And then was there another one?
Not anticipated right
Just
now.
the two. So
Yeah.
so far this year, and then in anticipation, do you have any comment on that, or?
I do, thank you, Mayor. I would anticipate, given the history that Zeballos has with parking, that our first year would be significant warnings. Just simply, people are used to it not being monitored, sort of parking as they wish. And for those that aren't aware of the new parking bylaw, should that come to be, may still try to take advantage of a system. So I could see year one being a little bit heavier than any subsequent year, because as Mr. Fletcher has pointed out, it's education. We're looking for voluntary compliance, not penalization, in the way that we enforce bylaws. As far as the rest of the community, we get maybe 2 or 3 enforcement calls a year, and they're usually fairly easy to take care of. It's usually, oh, sorry.
Okay, thank you for that. Anyone else? I have a question about your recommendation in your report. So it says that we have to request the Attorney General to enact a resolution or regulation.
Yes. Yes, from my understanding, and I think that's a better question directed
Okay.
to Mr. Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr. Fletcher. So the recommendation in our report, do you have a copy of the report in front of you?
I have, yes, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Yeah, perfect. So that first paragraph of the recommendation that says to make the local government bylaw notice enforcement act applicable to us.
That's correct. So, yes, your CAO, Pete Nelson Smith, very astutely has identified part of the process of enacting the bylaw offense notice system within your community. An application has to be made through to the province, and then by virtue of change in regulations, you folks as a village or as a local government entity would be identified as having the authority to adopt that bylaw and put it into practice within your community there.
Why is that? Why isn't that something that's not automatically just granted to us, that we have to go through a process to?
I can't answer that one, I'm sorry.
It's
The wisdom.
it's a time thing that I'm curious about with the province, why they don't just trust us to know what we need.
The wisdom of the province.
The other question I had, if no council has, SRD, have they, how, are they familiar with this, and how does this affect any of the services that the regional district may provide to us, if at all, through this CAO?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, they are aware of this. So our bylaw enforcement officer, Jennifer Wells, actually was the one that turned me on to the bylaw adjudication notice system. And her intention is to actually bring a similar report to the SRD board at some point. So yes, we've been working together, and she is quite familiar with the system.
And Gold River is the one that you have we have in our report as well.
That's correct.
Amazing. I was looking through this toolkit because I had a couple of, but I think that essentially through the presentation, you've answered all of the questions that I could have. So thank you for that, for being so thorough in your presentation. Yeah, I think that was it. Yep. That was all I had, folks.
Very good. Well, I would invite, if further questions come forward, your CAO knows how to reach me, and I'd be very happy to offer up any additional information that we might have missed this evening.
Thank you so much for your time and your knowledge on this subject. And thank you to our CAO for, Councillor Deck.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. It's been a pleasure meeting you, Mr. Fletcher, and you may be sorry you offered that last offer.
No, I do appreciate the opportunity. I've helped other communities. I've been doing this long enough, and I really do take a lot of pride in the work that I do and the work that my team does here. And we've really seen some great advancement in the profession of bylaw enforcement over the years. So anyway, it's opportunities like this that I really enjoy, meeting people like you folks and being able to help you in the direction that you choose to go in. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And from us all here, have a pleasant evening.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good
Good
night.
night. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Wow. Oh,
I
of
can,
course, as soon as he's gone. No.
yeah, I can always reach out.
Timeline for staff. It's just, I'm wondering, it's quite an extensive list. We know the province moves like molasses. So I'm not saying that anything that you folks here don't know. So the first step is getting that province's, do you know if that office is backed up or anything, or what that timeline is on this?
I don't. I think this will just be a steady process until we start to hit some key points. Obviously, staff is going to have to, if this is the direction council wants to go, staff is going to have to start looking at the checklist and working hopefully with Mr. Fletcher on moving it forward. And I think it'll be just a steady pace instead of a race.
Mm-hmm.
Just to make sure that we get it all done properly and make sure it fits in with our other priorities that the community is currently looking at.
And I do wonder if there's any contract kind of opportunities there for, you know, with his experience, if there's any, you know, I know he's come here as a guest this evening, right? But we're not, but if there's if there's any type of a contract type of, you know, as we have an engineer on staff that's you know, that we have, you know, to maybe takes some more of the pressures or tick some more of the boxes on here. Do you know what I mean?
Definitely.
Some of them we don't need, which I'm very happy to see, like it's not recommended, we would be the host organization, like there's things that we're not, that doesn't apply to us because we're small. But yeah, his expertise seems extensive and fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's going to be a lot of time involved in document creation, rob and duplicate. You know, Gold River's got a perfect example here. You know, a change in letterhead and away we go.
Yeah.
I think the effort's going to be taken in identifying the bylaws that need to be referred back to, and then bringing to council, you know, what is an appropriate fine for, you know, loose dog, aggressive dog, and so forth and so on, is eking out those sorts of questions. So the heavy lifting likely will be done on council side.
I'll have a couple things to say.
Councillor Janice.
So I think this is a great application for our little community. And I think if it gets underway, it's gonna make people realize there's a bit of consequence. And then maybe a little bit more and then a little bit more after that for their actions. And having follow-up from somebody out of the community, amazing, because we are so small. And I had a question through the CAO now. If fines are issued, is this something that would go on to their taxes? If it was how would they be enforced to be paid?
Through the mayor to Councillor Janice. Unfortunately, no. Ticketing can't be put on the property's taxes unless there's something specific to do with the property.
Okay.
So yeah, like an unsightly premises, but there are a number of steps that the administration and council need to go through in order to make those fees repayable by taxes. Really, this ticketing system is if at the end, and this would have been a good question for Mr. Fletcher, my understanding is if at the end, the recipient refuses to pay, it would likely go through a collection agency.
Right. Thank you.
And further to that, where do the revenues go?
Thank you. Revenues.
What are the options for revenue dispersal?
Definitely up to council. However, it would be brought back into the village's revenue stream. So how that is divided out at, at the creation of these bylaws and the budget, would be a council decision.
Would that be included in the bylaw?
No, that would be likely either through a statutory reserve or just through the general budget process.
Would it go through fees and charges?
Yes.
The reason I was kind of fumbling with all these papers is because I was looking at our noise bylaw, which we had, and I know that that's not on the table right now, and we've tabled that. But under there it says $100 minimum, $1,000 for first up to $1,000 for the first offense. Is this not a $500 limit? This ticketing mechanism?
Well,
and anything over that, you have to go to a different system?
I would have to look into that. I don't have the answer to that off the top of my head.
Okay.
Simply the noise bylaw was an example.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I knew that.
Yeah, and so for if council is heading in this direction, then all of our bylaws that have some sort of form of ticketing would need to be reviewed to ensure that they fall within the scope of the system that we choose. There will be certain ones, such as the unsightly premises, that we may wish to maintain as criminally enforceable, so that we can increase those fines to beyond what the bylaw adjudication allows for.
Councillor Jack, I see your hand up.
And down, up.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Sir Pete Nelson Smith. First steps first. Do we write a letter to the Attorney General and ask him to allow us to do this? And then worry about the rest of the paperwork?
Thank you. Through the mayor. Yeah, tonight being a committee of the whole, it would be a recommendation from the committee to council to be discussed at the next meeting. In that duration of time would give me the ability to do a little more research on what next steps are. And I do believe that that is the next step, is a formal letter to that ministry.
Very good, thank you, sir.
Yeah, I also believe that Mr. Fletcher, as I asked him about the specific recommendation coming out of the report, would have alerted us to if that was beyond the scope of where we were now or anything like that. So I'm confident that your recommendation is sound valid and something we should move forward with. Absolutely. Okay. Screening officer policy, would that be both you and I guess that's a conversation for us to have. Would that be both you, the deputy, in case of your absence or something like that? And I guess it wouldn't be the bylaw officer. That would be a further discussion to be if there was some kind of a contract arrangement or a municipal contracting, I forget what that's called. We have one with the SRD. A municipal services agreement. Thank you. Yeah, for that. I said it earlier, but then I lost it. Yeah, so those will all come. Those questions will all come to us, and we'll
Yes, thank you. That's correct. Yes, exactly the thoughts you're having, I'm having as, you know, putting us on the spot in the village office for an angry person wanting a screening officer right away. So, you know, these are all things we're gonna have to discuss around the table of what makes most sense for the village of Zeballos and what are the other opportunities that we have with other municipalities or the regional district. So, you know, I think lots of discussions to come along, a marathon again, not a race on this one.
Perfect. Okay. Anything else from anyone? Pretty sure that we all want movement on this. I'm also wondering if we can get ahead of some of these bylaws as we are rolling them out. And I, you know, rather than, or as well as in a Village Voice, if we can publish some of these bylaws and put them in as a box stuffer, this is new, this is what's happening, don't complain that you don't know. Right, because I think that the education scheme is really what people have been asking for this for a very long time. So be careful what you wish for. I'm glad that we're moving ahead on this, right? I think that the public has asked us to do this multiple times and have some teeth in our bylaws. And so as we're rolling the bylaws out and as we're getting more teeth to be really public about this would be great. Okay, anybody ready to move a recommendation that's included in the? Do you want this recommendation to come from here so that it can go to the regular meeting,
Yes, thank you.
please? That the recommendation would be that council, have staff formally request the Ministry of the Attorney General to enact a regulation to make the local government bylaw notice enforcement act applicable to the village of Zeballos, and that the committee recommend to council that staff prepare a bylaw notice enforcement bylaw, a screening officer policy, and amendments to existing bylaws as necessary.
I'll second that.
Questions, comments? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That's carried. That was a really good presentation. I think it answered all of the questions that everybody had. So moving through our agenda, we have no petitions, delegations, correspondence, reports. New business, we do have it in camera, so if somebody wanted to, did I say carried on that last motion?
Yes.
Perfect. Somebody wants to move that in camera motion?
Council going to go in Canberra under Community Charter Section 91C, Labor and Staff Relations.
Second.
Perfect. Questions,
Second.
comments? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That's
Okay.
carried. Got no public here. We can adjourn this meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? That's carried.